Hello, and thank you for watching and listening to the Wine Centric Show. I am so honored today to welcome this titaness of the wine industry on the Wine Centric Show. We talk to the titans and the titanesses of the wine business, and we make them relatable for everybody, no matter what part of your wine journey you are on. Here with me today, she is the matriarch of winemaking and certainly of Argentine winemaking. She is a doctor. She is an author. She is a winemaker, a humanitarian, an environmentalist, and the accolades go on and on. But best for you to hear it from her. Here is Dr. Laura Catena.
I had never heard the word titaness. I love it.
It's Women's History Month here, and obviously there's no better woman in the business or no bigger titaness to kick it off than you. And that's our tagline. So I had to, you feel free to use it. You can introduce yourself as I'm Titaness Catena. Hey, I like to start with a little game. It's like a little brain teaser. So if you'll indulge me, it wakes up their senses, gets your brain working. It's like a stretch for your brain if you're okay with it.
I love it. Let's do it.
What I'm going to ask you is, we just had the Oscars a couple of nights ago, and I think it makes wine really relatable when we relate wines to celebrities, because everybody knows major world celebrities. So we're going to set the scenario as you are going to this person's home for dinner, and you're asked to bring a Catena wine. And I'm going to give you the celebrity. You tell me which Catena wine and why.
That would require that I know celebrities.
Oh, these are people that
I don't know.
Trust
me. Oh my
me.
God.
If you don't know them, we'll go to somebody that you do know.
Yeah, or we have a refresher. Okay, let's see how bad my movie star knowledge is.
Okay. The first person, we'll start with a female, another titan of the movie world. She just won Best Supporting Actress for Emilia Perez, and her name is Zoe Saldana. Are you familiar with her?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yes, beautiful young woman.
Yep. You're invited to her house for dinner.
Fiery
and flexible, malleable to many situations. Yes. Before you answer that, Dr. Catena, I need to tell you about an incredible event called BBQ and Bubbly. That's right. BBQ lovers and sparkling wine enthusiasts, listen up. This one's for you. You need to join us at Fenton. It's Cary, North Carolina's premier food and dining venue. It's on May 31st. It's a sizzling celebration of smoky flavors and effervescent delights. We're bringing in 10 of my favorite chefs and pitmasters to take their best swing at their favorite barbecue styles and dishes. I'm talking Texas barbecue, Carolina whole hog, and even barbacoa. And complementing these savory dishes are 20, that's right, 20 incredible sparkling wines from around the world. We're talking Cava, Prosecco, Champagne, might even be throw in a Petnat. And these delightful sparkling beverages have been curated by our friends at the Raleigh Wine Shop and Luella Durham. Oh, and you're wondering, do I bring the kids? Do I have to find a babysitter? Don't worry. Heather Donovan Realty has gone out of her way to provide a lit kid zone. We got inflatables. We have games. We have fairy hair. We have fair style cotton candy and much more. Trust me, the adults are going to be hanging out more in the kid zone. All right. So for more details, check out the April issue of Cary Magazine or Wake Living for the full scoop. Early bird tickets are on sale now through March 31st. Do not miss out. See you at Fenton on May 31st for the ultimate BBQ and Bubbly experience. Get your tickets by simply searching BBQ and Bubbly or visit our bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/BBQ and Bubbly. That's bit.ly/BBQ and Bubbly. See you there.
Okay. I would bring Catena Alta Chardonnay because it's a wine that has elegance and power. And that's how I see her.
I love it. When was it that you officially took the role as director of Catena?
I always forget the exact date, but it was around 2012 or 15. So it's been a while. I was still working clinically. Yeah.
Right. Your dad is still involved though, no?
Oh, yes.
Peering over your shoulder?
No, I make him work. He is my number one employee. So Listen, my dad is amazing. From the day he said, now you're in charge, he let me make every decision, in the sense that my dad and I worked very closely for the longest time. We would work together. We divided the business, and then I was doing more of the exports and the research, and he was doing more, the domestic market and more managing some of the teams in Mendoza. And then I started going more to Argentina and getting really involved in the production side, because that's what is my skill set from being a scientist. It made a lot of sense to be involved in the production side. And I also really like that. And my dad really likes it too. My dad and I still work very closely, and he just comes to me with ideas and things, and we talk about it, and we use the Socratic method. When we have something that we disagree upon, I present my view, he presents his view. And the difference between before and now is that in the olden days, generally he would win. If we disagreed on something, he would make the final call. And we never fought over this, because usually he would convince me. Like, the thing with my dad and I is that we generally convince each other of our position, and we have to fight to convince the other one. And if my dad disagrees with me, I take it very seriously, because he's very experienced, he has good instinct. And so I always tell him, I said, I don't want to force you to make this decision. I want to convince you. And I work really hard to convince him. And I often modify my position in order to convince him. And he does the same with me. But then ultimately, when I started being in charge, the main difference was that I would have the final call. And that's how my dad and I have been working for 30 years.
That sounds super enlightened. I have to imagine, or maybe not. There's never been a moment where you wanted to do something and he wanted to do something and you couldn't come to an accord, and then you had to, I don't know, give him the treatment for a couple of days.
No, we never do that. The only thing we do is he will write to me when he really wants something, and he'll say, I want you to think about it one last time. Or he'll say, send me the arguments again. I hate that. I'll just reset, like I'll get a little pissy. I already sent you this. I sent it to him again, but then I think about it and I say, oh, okay. But I'm going to now address his new point about this. And literally, when we're done with a decision, we never look back. Or we do look back and we say, okay, we made a mistake. But it's never about whose idea it was or whose mistake it was. We just really coexist really well, and we build things together. And I will admit many times, like, wow, I was wrong about this, and he will too.
This is why you're a Titaness. This is why that we look to you for these wonderful things. And the Chardonnay, just because?
Because it's not because of white wine female, but I find that white wine is more of a movie star wine, because there's something about white wine, champagne, that's more celebratory. I think of red wine as a more brooding. I would think of maybe, I don't know, James Bond movie, like in a cellar with a villain.
Yeah.
You would drink red wine and become friends with the villain. I don't know.
Yeah, like
I have a very vivid imagination. Yeah.
Like an edgy Cognac.
Yeah. Oh, an edgy Cognac or a Malbec Argentino, I might say. But I'm thinking she just won the Oscar. I'm thinking something uplifting. And so I'm thinking white wine. And I mostly drink aged reds. So yeah. Okay. But I'm not a women white wine, like the feminine, masculine thing. Yeah, that's not my thing.
I get what you're saying. It evokes more of this star quality in the mind, for sure. And it's funny, 2 episodes ago, I had a former colleague of yours, Mr. Paul Hobbs, and I said something, I don't know if it's controversial, but it's definitely a little bit of a hot button issue on my Instagram right now, of that. My opinion is that Argentine Chardonnay is the best Chardonnay in the world right now, hands down.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I love that
I don't think that's controversial at all.
Exactly. Thank you for being an ally.
But here's what I might say. Yeah. It's hard to say what's the best, because it's such a personal, it's the best for you. Anybody can say that. But the one interesting thing about Argentine Chardonnay, and many people have never had an Argentine Chardonnay, is that we have the cool climate, which is necessary for a Chardonnay, because otherwise it'll be flabby, and we don't like flabby Chardonnay. For it to have the florals, the elegance, the minerality, it's got to be from cool climate. But the difference between other cool climate Chardonnays like Burgundy or some cooler parts of the US or New Zealand or wherever where you have this cool climate, we have more sunlight because we're at altitude. And what the sunlight does is that it increases the polyphenols, and it allows you to ripen without losing acidity, because you have the cool climate and you have the sunlight. And so the really great Argentine Chardonnay, like the Catena Chardonnay, is going to have the minerality, the freshness, the florals, this kind of elegance that we love and the acidity, but it's also going to have this natural creaminess and power. And if you like that, then you might say that Argentine Chardonnay is the best from cool climate.
I'm going to agree. And I'm going to break that down for everybody listening. And they're like, what is she talking about? Polyphenols and all this stuff. Well, very simply, the grape on the vine has a life of its own. And as it grows alcohol and sugar or acidity and sugar, and they all come like this, at some point, if you pick too late, the sugar spikes and the acidity drops out. And then you don't get the complexity of what you said, Lara, the polyphenols, which gives it all those extra beautiful, complex flavors, the added minerality and floral notes and all of that stuff. So yes, I love crispy and creamy all in one glass of Chardonnay.
Yeah. And just to explain it, it's as the grape is ripening, you think about it, you've eaten grapes, right? So as it ripens, it develops this beautiful sweetness that's going to develop into beautiful alcohol. But if you have just plain grape juice, it's too sweet, right? In wine, it's the same problem. You want the acidity, and then you get the acidity with the alcohol, and it's beautiful. If you had lower acidity, you would just be having syrupy alcohol, and that wouldn't be yummy. So it makes sense. And it also makes sense about the cool climate and the acidity, because when it's too hot, the plant uses up the acids. And so there's less acid left. So if you are having a wine from a place that's too warm, it might be very alcoholic and not very high acid or fresh. And some people actually like that. But for white wine, you particularly need the acidity. For red wine is a little more forgiving in terms of the acidity. And that makes sense.
Absolutely. I always say that what you're talking about is balance in wine. It's the sweetness and the acidity. In any fruit, we want that, right? And so it's not about sweetness, just sugary sweet. It's about ripeness. And that's what you're describing there.
Exactly.
Wow, we didn't need to wake up your brain. It was already fully stretched. You did your yoga exercises this morning. You're there.
I did my posture exercises. I do a little Pilates every morning.
That's your main method of exercise, Pilates?
Yes, but not with the machine. I do the one that you do it on the wall, and I have this little thing that I push, this circle thing that I do my muscle exercises, and then I walk my dog. Yeah.
I'm going to go there for a second. First of all, because I love hearing about people's wellness routine in general. And then I want to get to your dog later too. Like, how many times a week are you doing Pilates and how often?
So, I used to just get up and start doing emails, and then I realized that was a terrible idea. So I usually get up at 6 and I do a few things. I do first my Pilates on the floor, and I do this really cool exercise that is for posture, because I think we're all in front of a computer. I'm often in the vineyard and in the winery, but in the end, we're all in front of a computer at some point of the day. And you basically put your back and you bend your knees, your back to the wall, and you try to have the back of your head and your back touch the wall. And then you bend your knees. It's really good quad exercise too. And you just do that for 2 minutes if you are able to tolerate it. It's mostly the legs that get tired. And I do that every day, a couple times a day. So that's a posture thing. And then the Pilates is more, I push against this little like arm thing while I'm doing sit-ups. I don't do a long thing. It's literally maybe 5 minutes, but I do exercises that work many parts of my body at once because I want to get out and walk my dog. But it actually works, because for health, you should do some aerobic, and also you should do some muscle training, especially as you get older, you lose muscle. And yeah, that's my routine.
I love the efficiency of that. By the way, everybody who's listening, she's not just a doctor in name. She's actually was a practicing medical doctor for a very long time.
Yeah.
You can validate the source. Speaking of that, I've just been reading and I couldn't find this, but it's in my own brain that at some point, maybe you wanted to be a veterinarian instead of a medical or a human doctor.
Yeah, I was obsessed. I've always been obsessed with animals of all sorts. My brother was too, and we grew up with animals, horses and chickens. And after I saw Charlotte's Web, that was it. My grandfather used to roast a pig, and I put my foot down. I said, we're not eating pig anymore. And like we didn't, which I think is extreme, because I don't know. I think humans, we live on this earth. I don't eat a lot of meat, but I have nothing against eating meat. I think it's part of our life as long as we don't mistreat the animals. But I was always obsessed with animals. But the thing is, I can't see animals suffer. And you might say, oh my God, so you can see people suffer? I am touched by anybody suffering. In fact, I did a lot of pediatric emergency medicine, and partly is because if I heard a child crying in my emergency department, I had to go see what was wrong with them. And many times it was just that they wanted some graham crackers and they were fine. But if I see suffering, I have to go do something about it. But with animals, I don't think I could take it. I don't think I could take doing anything to an animal. A lot of people say that about being a doctor. They couldn't be next to somebody suffering. And I feel the same way about animals. So I decided I could not be a veterinarian. So I would take care of people, which is also hard.
Yeah. But I hear what you're saying. It's like children and animals. There's some sort of helplessness there, which makes your empathy just rise even more.
Yes.
How are you with pruning in the vineyard?
I actually also have a problem with pulling out vines. So when a vineyard gets really old, at some point you have to pull it out because it's producing nothing and you have this land there. But we have a deal with our head of viticulture that he has to ask me like 10 times, should we pull this vineyard? The yields are down to a third. Now they're down half. Now they're down. And we have a rule of how low it has to be, which is really low. At that point, the vine it's no longer enjoying itself because it's so hard to produce like a few little clusters. And he has to not tell me about it and just pull it out and replant it. And he has like a budget that is pre-approved. But I wait a lot before pulling a vineyard because even going down half in quantity, if the quality is really good, you can put it into a wine of a higher price and that has a value. If you did the exact financial calculation, it would probably be better to replant it. But to me, just to save a few pennies, you shouldn't shorten the life of a vineyard. A vine is a plant that is living on our earth. It's also sequestering carbon. If you think about it from a sustainability standpoint, every time you pull it out, you just ruin the whole carbon cycle and the sequestering of that vine. So the longer you can leave a vine on the ground, the more carbon it's going to sequester and the carbon is going to stay there. When you pull it out, you eliminate the carbon sequestering for a while because older vines have more roots and sequester more carbon. So I think there's a sustainability argument, but mostly for me, it's a sentimental argument and a quality. There is a quality argument. As the vine becomes older, produces less, it's better quality. It's just more refined. It's also more adapted to climate change. So if there's a bad year, usually those old vines that have the deeper root systems, they do better than the young vines. So if you get hit by frost, an old vine is more likely to survive. A really old vine is not. It's not that different from people. But I'm very sentimental. But pruning to me is almost like it's the exercise of the vines. They've got to do it because if they have too many branches, then it's too much for them. They have to produce all the food for all those branches. So it's actually good for them. So I don't feel bad about that. I feel a little bit. I think about it. I have to reason myself into, okay, this is good for the vine because I do cringe a little when I do that first cut.
Yeah. It's like you hear the vines screaming a little bit.
No, but they are fine with it because it's good for them. Then they get to rest. Otherwise, they're feeding all these branches. Yeah, it's like your kids going to college. Let's think of it that way. They go to college, they're doing great. Right. And you're now at home a little more relaxed. So
You're right. I'm not spread as thin. And it's also, I like your analogy for exercising. It's like cutting the fat because now you don't have to carry around that weight. So
that's probably a better one. I didn't think of it as exercising, getting rid of the fat. I like that. Yeah, that's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't think about the environmental thing of it. Yeah. Not only are you, when you're pulling out a vine, you're releasing all that carbon, but then the obviously machinery it takes to replant a vineyard is a lot. So let's unpack that for those of you listening. You're like, what are they talking about? Okay. Vines, like you said, and I love to talk about, have a life cycle very much like a human being. From 0 to 3, you can't even make wine from those grapes. Then from 3 to 10, they're like, the grapes are very brash and brazen without much wisdom or complexity. They make some wine, but it's like not interesting. And then from 10, they start to progress more and get more complex. And then in 20 to maybe 40, depending on how they are, they get really beautiful and start making great wine. After 40, I'm generalizing, they start to get less virile and they produce less, but the grapes are very high quality. And so that becomes
I would say that already starts after 20 years.
After 20?
It's almost 30-year-olds. Okay, so when you're 40, a little more than when you're 30, but when you're 30, like a bright 30-year-old is amazing.
Yes.
So I think I would say 20 years for the vine. And then some soils and climates, like we have this vineyard, deep soils by a river, a dried river that sometimes has water. These soils are incredible. The climate's good. It's a little warm. Actually, it's not Uco Valley. It's a little warmer. We have some vines there that are 100 years old, and they're still producing really well. So the rule about older vines not producing as well is also not 100%. There's disease pressures, there's climate pressures, there's the vine material. There's also grafting. So one of the theories that we haven't completely proven, because most of our vineyards are ungrafted in Argentina. So you'd have to have a grafted next to an ungrafted. And we're actually creating that experiment so that in 100 years, I can say what happens. But my theory is that when you do grafting, it's American rootstock with a Vitis vinifera on top. And the reason is because there's this pest called phylloxera, there's nematodes, there's things that would chew at the roots of the European vines. They have to graft them on the American vine that grew up with this phylloxera aphid. So it's resistant to it. But when you graft, think about it. Like if you have an apple tree and you graft on a pear tree, like you basically put the little cutting and you wrap it together and they come together. It's almost like, this is gory. If you cut your finger off and you bring the finger in, they actually reattach it. Okay. Yeah. So think about it. That finger that got reattached, it's been through all this trauma. So I think that ungrafted vines last longer as long as they're not in a phylloxera infested place. And we have phylloxera, but doesn't propagate. So I think these ungrafted vines can often live longer than grafted vines. And that's something that we have in Argentina, although we also graft in some parts of Argentina because of the soils. So if it's a very rocky soil, a very poor soil, the American rootstock is stronger. It's a little better with water stress. So we might still graft, but most of the vineyards, especially Malbec vineyards, are ungrafted. That means it's just the Vitis vinifera, the European variety, just planted straight on the soil and growing a root system. You don't have to mesh it with the American rootstock.
Yeah. And if you replant a vineyard, you do have to graft it then eventually in Argentina now, right?
Yeah. So many times because of something called nematodes, you graft when you replant because it would be hard for this Vitis vinifera to take. But when you replant that vineyard, you could plant ungrafted. And if you're planting in a new location. So we're planting in both manners still. So new locations, we go for ungrafted generally.
Okay. I think that it's a really important conversation because I've heard you talk about this before. And I think most of the end wine consumers don't realize the decisions that are farming decisions, but also business decisions behind it. But when you think of how the cost of a bottle of wine gets to that end consumer, it's interesting that you say that, I think we can make a higher quality wine. But if I'm a consumer, I would challenge you on that, because if I'm a consumer and I buy, you said La Lunta Catena Malbec I've been buying it for 5-10 years, whatever it is, I'm just making up the price, let's say $25, right? And then a couple years later, all of a sudden it's $30-35 for the same wine. Is that end consumer getting the understanding, like all that we just talked about, of what goes into that bottle, and the fact that, okay, this vine is now producing amazingly high quality fruit, but it's less. I'm making more. And so to cover my costs, I have to charge more. I don't know.
Yeah. It's very complex. There's an organization called Our Old Vines in UK, and they have created a registry of old vine vineyards around the world, and all the producers are logging in and putting information about these vineyards. So as a consumer, you can look these things up, and they're trying to spread the word about old vines and how important it is to preserve them and the quality argument. There's many arguments. There's a quality argument, the carbon footprint, the sentimental argument. And I think that you raise a really good question about what is the role of the consumer? Because really the role of the consumer is to get the best quality at the best price. Of course, I would love for people to decide to pay more for wine or spend more money on wine than on fruits and vegetables. The reality is that wine is not essential. It is essential to me. I've got to have my couple days a week that I drink my wine. It's such an important part of my life experience. I would be a lot sadder in life, and my dinners with my husband would be a lot less fun and just interesting. The conversation would be less interesting if I didn't have wine. So for me, it's an essential product. But yes, I would not die if I didn't drink wine. And wine in the end has to compete with other things. On the other hand, I love to tell people that it would be best to drink less and better. And so I'm always preaching this. The dietary guidelines are pretty well researched. One glass per day for women. And I always talk in wine terms, but it can be beer or spirits, although there is some pretty good data that wine might be better than the other spirits. But the cardiovascular benefits are probably just from the alcohol, because alcohol acts as a blood thinner, it increases HDL, and it improves sugar in diabetics and non-diabetics. It just helps sugar control. This is well demonstrated. So it's the actual alcohol that provides this role. There might be some other benefits to wine from the polyphenols, also from the fact that wine is usually drank with food, and that means it's absorbed more slowly, and that might be beneficial. But back to the price of the wine, I tell people, listen, my women friends, not a lot of people want to drink just one glass. If you go to dinner, you want to have 2 glasses, at least that's me, or a glass and a half. I want to have a glass of champagne, and then I want to have a glass with dinner. I might even want a dessert, like a little half of a glass of dessert wine. Really, you don't want to have 5 times that. So you don't want to have a whole bottle. Binge drinking is defined as 4 glasses in 2 hours for a woman and 5 in 2 hours for a man. So that would be like a man drinking a whole bottle within 2 hours, which I know a lot of people who do that. You get to a wine party, you're having your glass filled, and it's very easy to end up by the end of that meal, which might be 2 hours, drinking that whole glass. So what I tell people is,
I'll say my alcohol dehydrogenase level is my superpower. It's like through the roof.
The thing is, if you drink regularly, that's another thing that people don't know. Your body revs up your alcohol dehydrogenase, and so you produce more of it. And that's why when people do dry January and they go back to drinking, all of a sudden they have one glass and they're drunk, and they say, what happened? Yeah. That's normal. Your body stopped overproducing that enzyme. And I actually totally respect people who do dry January. I think that if you find yourself drinking too much at some point, drinking more than the up to 2 glasses per day, I don't know, take a week off. But then when you restart, make sure you restart slowly, because, your alcohol dehydrogenase is asleep or your body's producing less. But anyhow, I'm a big fan of drink better quality, drink less, or if on a certain day, I'm a woman, the diet guidelines say 1 glass per day. I would personally rather have 2 glasses on Friday and Saturday and then not drink on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I think but don't have a whole bottle any day, because the toxic element, alcohol is a blood thinner. I already explained the cardioprotective effects. And there was this really reputable study that just came out from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine that basically looked at moderate drinkers. So a woman drinking up to 1 glass per day, a man drinking up to 2, versus people who never drink. And they had lower mortality. It was actually a stronger effect for women than for men, and lower mortality from cardiovascular causes. And cardiovascular is the number 1 killer. So if you reduce cardiovascular disease, that's it, automatic. You increase life. But they had this slight breast cancer association.
Yes.
And it's small. It's small. But the thing is, at my age, I have a 10 times greater chance of dying from heart disease, from breast cancer. And it wasn't like your breast cancer is doubled. It's basically you go from a risk of 12% over your whole lifetime of breast cancer to 13%. So it was a small risk. Whereas the cardiovascular decrease was 20% decrease in the mortality. That's wow. Let's say your risk is 20%. You go 20% down. That's like your risk went down to 16%. That's pretty monumental. On the other hand, people are scared of different things. So every person has to make the decision. But back to this drinking better and less. I am not worried about these statistics of people drinking less or the young people drinking less. First of all, when I was a young person, everybody was panicking. Oh, young people drinking less. Young people don't drink wine, or maybe they do with their parents or as a hobby. Like the very few wine geeky people that exist in the world. Once you get a little bit older, you get a dog, you start drinking wine, you get a better place. Wine is part of becoming a more sophisticated person. And a lot of people get the wine bug. And the key is to drink in moderation, the way the people have for millennia, the Mediterranean diet. You go to those little Greek villages, there's the blue zones where people live to 100 because they're walking to the supermarket. They're not driving. They're going up this little hill with their donkey. Literally, this is how people live still, and that is healthier. And they have their fruits and vegetables and their fish, and they don't eat meat every day because meat's too expensive. And then they have their little glass, 1 or 2 glasses of wine every day, one with lunch, one with dinner. So any way we can get closer to that kind of lifestyle, which we can't really. It's idealistic. We have to get in a car. Most people don't live next to a grocery store. But anything you can do to get yourself in that direction with wine in moderation is good. And so drink less, drink better. I love that. Drink old vines. Yeah, maybe you have to pay a little more, but it's a win-win. You drink better and you drink less. It's good for your health and it's good for the environment.
And for those when you get of older age, if you drink better wine, more wine, maybe you spend a little bit more on the wine and then you don't have to take Lipitor.
Yeah, that's true because wine in moderation increases HDL. And this is something that many people don't know. Alcohol people don't love it when I say this, but actually after the age of 65, you're supposed to drink less. So this whole thing about moderation, the up to two glasses per day, if you're over 65, you should reduce as a man, you should reduce that to one. And a lot of people don't like that because they're used to having the two glasses. So what I would say is, okay, maybe you drink two glasses a couple days a week, but then skip a few days and drink nothing, which is good anyhow, because it takes out the habit. It's very easy to drink more and more. Alcohol is a somewhat addictive substance. So if you spend 3 days drinking more, the next day you're going to want to drink what you started with. It's like sweets, chips, potato chips. If you ever give me a bag of potato chips, I cannot stop. I am a potato chip addict. Therefore, I don't have potato chips in my house, or I keep them like in a little bag in some closet that I have to get on a ladder to reach them. So I think that this is something that a lot of people don't know. As you get older, you should drink a little less. You can modify your habit to achieve that goal of up to 1 glass per day.
All I'm thinking as you say this is now I have 18 years and the clock is ticking to drink as much wine as I possibly can. Okay. I got to ask you because there's just so much that you do. But before I even want to get into like how you prioritize this, I want to talk a little bit about the history of your family. Your family is synonymous with Argentine winemaking and with Argentina in general. And your father from your grandfather passed it on. There's this legacy of education, of winemaking, of being an activist. I have to ask this. What is it that you and your father, Nicholas, argue about?
I always tell people, I have this saying that nothing good comes out of something good. All the best things come out of something bad. I made this up, and I think there's actually some philosopher that said this in a more elegant way. What happened was we were living in Argentina. My dad had studied economics at Columbia because living in Argentina, he wanted to help our country. And so he said, I'm going to go study abroad and maybe come back and help my country. And he comes back to Argentina and he can't help anything because we have 1,000% inflation. It's a disaster. We have these governments that are doing all kinds of bad economic initiatives. And then we get this military government, which is a terrible thing. Anybody who's lived in a military government, democracies might be flawed, but you don't want to live in a military government. You don't want a dictatorship. So we're living in Argentina. There's this military government. There's said to be all these kidnappings. My uncle was kidnapped for ransom. My father had to negotiate his release. So my dad said, we're all moving to California. He managed to get this position as a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley in the agriculture economics department. We moved to Berkeley. So I went from this public school in Argentina that was this very academic school, but because it was a public school, the military were involved. So it was really structured. You couldn't talk in the hallways. It was a really good school. Then I got to Berkeley in the 80s. And my God, like it was crazy. I couldn't believe what people were letting these kids do. You could talk in class. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I was a young person and it was transformative for both me and my dad. So my dad starts going with my mom to the Napa Valley and he sees this revolution. He sees that these Californians are challenging the French, the judgment of Paris that, happens in the late 70s. And he says, oh my God, California is challenging the French for the top wines. I'm going to go do this in Argentina. And his Italian grandfather, the founder of our winery, who was Italian, came to Argentina, had told him, listen, you can compete with anybody. You can compete with the Italians, he said. We make better wines. And he was Argentinian, Italian. He was born in Italy, came to Argentina, and he claimed that Argentine wine was better than Italian wine as an immigrant. But he said, but don't challenge the French because they have this thing called terroir. And nobody else has that. And then my dad says, what? The French don't own this terroir thing. Look at the Californians. I'm going to go do this in Argentina. And about 3 years ago, we proved the existence of terroir in Argentina through a chemical fingerprint. So actually, our family's gone full circle from my great-grandfather saying that only the French have terroir to us in Argentina at the Catena Institute doing the best study on terroir ever done and publishing it in Scientific Reports, which is a Nature magazine. Very big deal. Anyhow, back to our family history. So my dad goes there, he gets inspired. I then go to Harvard undergrad. I study biology, but here's this pivotal moment. I decide to be a doctor because I want to help people. And I say, oh, my dad, he runs a business. Wine, it's a business. Because young people are not generally interested in wine unless you're from Mendoza. A lot of young people in Mendoza study wine. I was living in Berkeley. Nobody, the American kids I knew drank beer.
Yeah.
And I go to college. I decide to be a doctor. My dad is very upset. And I say to my mom, why is he upset? All the other parents are so proud of their kids who want to be a doctor. He said, no, he wants you to go work with him. I was like, I'm not going to work with my dad. I want to help people. And there comes my medical career. And then I'm already have a job as a doctor, as an emergency physician. And my dad asked me to go help him with a wine event at the New York Wine Experience. And I go to this event just to help my dad because he says, you're the only one who speaks English. It was a trick. We had plenty of people who spoke English well. Plus, people love strong accents. The stronger your accent, the more wine you sell.
And it didn't hurt that you were a young, beautiful Argentine woman with an accent as well.
Yeah, exactly. But he said the accent of the people in Argentina is too strong. And, that's ridiculous. Whatever. I went and I said, oh my God, my poor dad is never going to reach the fame of the French wines and the Italian wines and the California wines because nobody knew Argentine wine in the 1990s. We were all alone trying to sell these, what appeared expensive, $20 a bottle, $50 a bottle. Back then, that was what the Grand Crus were charging, but the top California wines. So I basically started working with my dad just to help him because I felt bad for him. And then I started doing the research and I became obsessed. And I love vineyards. I love working the land. I love what it means to preserve the art of wine, the culture behind wine. And I became obsessed. And I love vineyards. I love working the land. I love what it means to, it's such a beautiful thing. And now I think that actually somebody who makes wine is helping humanity as much as a doctor, maybe more, because you're giving jobs, you're preserving ecosystems, you're sequestering carbon, you're providing joy to people. As a doctor, you're seeing your 20 patients a day. And I'm not minimizing the value of doctors, obviously, and people in healthcare, but I think that a responsible business, a sustainable business that takes care of the land is equally worthy in terms of helping the world be a better place.
Absolutely. Okay. I know that we are close to time. I want to talk about a few things specific to Argentina and your life. I'm just curious, you have all these things that you do between an author, you are instrumental with things regard to the environment, the new Bodega Accord that you're writing to reduce carbon footprint.
Yes.
You're still creating great wines at the Catena winery and all of the other projects that you're making. You're a mother of 3. You're a wife. By the way, your husband is a doctor. I would love to hear on the next time, the first time you introduce your husband to your father. That we'll save for another story.
My dad, everybody loves my husband because they think I'm difficult and he's stayed with me. I'm a horrible wife. I pay no attention to my husband. I'm terrible. I really am the worst wife. I'm a really good mother. I'm a great dog owner. I'm a great employee. I'm a great daughter, I think. My husband's really great. He's so smart and fun, but I am always trying to get him to do things. And he's always, I'm not your employee and stuff like that. But he's still with me. That's the good thing. And I think he's great. And he loves me. I guess I'm not boring, but I wouldn't say that I'm a model wife. I would like to be a lot more loving and caring and all these things that I see some other people. The big thing is my husband always says, why can't you be as nice to me as you are with the children? And I was like, that's not cultural for me. In my culture, a mom is for the kids and the husband is second priority. And I don't know, someday maybe I aspire to being a good wife.
Your youngest is 15, so they're almost out of the house.
No, she's 19 now.
Oh, she's 19 now.
They're all out of the house. But the problem is now the kids have been replaced by the dog.
God. Poor Daniel. He can't win.
He cannot win. It's a very sad thing. Poor. Yeah.
We thank him for you and your gifts to the world. So back to my initial question, where do you prioritize? Like when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing that's going off in your brain between writing your books, running the winery, or doing all this stuff for climate change? And
so I have a really simple method. So I carry a checklist that I have divided in sections, and I literally just write on a piece of paper. And it's on the right-hand side, I have the family. So I'll have each one of our kids and something I need to do for the family. And then on the left-hand side is my work. And the reason I do this is because I read this book called Getting Things Done. It's like this old book that's been around forever. And what happens is that if your brain is filled with all the things you're thinking all the time that you need to do, then you can't think. So by carrying this checklist, every time I'm on a call and I think I have to do something, I put it on the checklist. And I'll have it by sections. I'll have it by different countries, different people in my team, all the things that I need to do with them. And so that really helps me. And then usually once a week, I cross off things and I rewrite it so I don't forget stuff. And then I'll have a little section that is things that are sort of long-term projects, but I'll keep it there so that I don't forget about stuff. So that's that. And then I have the B- philosophy. And what that means is that you've got your A+ activities and you've got your B- just means I just need to get this done. And it doesn't need to be A+ level because you can't do everything A+. And this was a realization I had when I had my second child. And I hope this is not embarrassing, but I started having less milk production because I was so stressed out. And I read this book that had this philosophy and I said, wow, this is really true. I'm trying to do everything really well. And that's not compatible with my goals. And I started talking even within my team at the winery. Okay, this is an A+. You can't make bad wine. The wine quality has to be good. So you have to figure that out. But is my house neat or perfectly clean? No, that's not that important. And did I feed my kids chicken nuggets? Yeah, I can't make everything fresh. And I think that accepting that some things are A+ and some are not is the only philosophy if you want to do things well. And in this current world, there is no simple job where you can just do A+ things. All jobs require you do a lot of things. And it's better to do some things by the deadline and not perfectly than to not do them. And the hard thing is really accepting that from other people. Because like from my team, I've told them, I said, if I'm hard on you on something, you need to tell me, hey, you told me about the B-. Can this be a B-? And I don't want it to be a B-, but they pin me down. They're like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this and do that other thing as an A+. And I'll say, okay, you're right. I said that. That's my philosophy. So I believe it, but then it's not as easy to do the execution on that, to accept a B- from others. So
yeah, I would say, I think what you're saying is golden nuggets, taking it back to the nuggets, pun intended, for the rest of us out there listening to you. And I would say, I would want you to talk to my wife, except for the prioritizing husband thing. So I don't know. I have to think about the rest of that. Lara, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you. We could go on and on. We didn't even really talk about the Bodegas de Argentina Sustainability Code, but just to really sum it up, you are doing such amazing work in reducing the weight size and the glass size of the bottles coming from the Catena winery that really helps your carbon footprint. And we can talk more of that on another time. But just to end it, will you tell me, besides your moment at the wine experience when you subbed in for your dad, what do you think was the seed change that made Argentine Malbec commercially viable for export?
I think it's the flavor. It's a variety that's been around for 2,000 years. It's been famous in Europe. In Bordeaux, it was the main variety. There was more Malbec planted than Cabernet Sauvignon when the first growers were classified. So it's just delicious. And I honestly think that it was my father who had the audacity to bring it back and who put the work of convincing people in the early days, one bottle at a time. He had the vision that he could do it. It took a pioneer to just go out there and do something that initially was really hard. It was easier to sell Chardonnay and Cabernet, but he really went out there with high quality Malbec, with luxury, more expensive Malbec that was coming from special places. But then, as my father likes to say, he got lucky. It happens to taste really great. It's got full body, velvety tannins, beautiful aromatics, and to me, it's like dark chocolate. Dark chocolate, why does it sell? Because it's delicious. Coffee, it's a flavor that humans like. And I think Malbec is just a flavor that humans like Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay. Why have those varieties persisted over time? Is because they're delicious. And yeah, I think we got lucky that my great-grandfather came from Italy to Argentina and had the vision to plant Malbec. And we got lucky also that my dad had this experience in Napa that inspired him to go back home and do something great. And that then he had the vision to bring back this variety that was on its way out. It was being pulled out. And so it's a little bit of vision and hard work and a bit of luck, like everything in life.
There you go. Said, as I let you go here, I'm going to put on my celebratory beret.
Oh, yay!
And I'll let you know that for tonight, I'm going to be choosing between these two, the beautiful Argentino or the Cassia. I don't know. We'll see.
Choice. That is a tough choice.
It's a tough choice, but I'm only going to have 2 glasses, I promise. For all of you out there, I will say you've heard the story, you know the name. Go get yourself your hands on some Catena wines and you will drink deliciously.